Welcome to Healthcare IT Today. I'm John Lynn, together with my colleague and friend Colin Hung. The world of technology and healthcare ever-changing in new and novel ways, and that's why we love this stuff. So join us as we discuss the latest healthcare and health IT news, meshed together in new ways, which help generate ideas and new perspectives. Plus, we'll have a little fun along the way. Today, we're going to be doing some tributes to some special people in health IT who recently passed away. And we're going to be talking about, a person's legacy in health IT, including our own. Should be a really interesting discussion. A bit of a somber topic today, though, to be fair. And be sure to follow the show on social media at the hashtag HITSM and our personal accounts at TechGuy and at Colin_Hung. Plus, check out our 17 years of health IT blog content at healthcareittoday.com. Well, as I said, it's a bit of a somber topic today. I don't know how it is for you, Colin, but I know I've been even talking to my parents, my aunts and uncles. I haven't lost any aunt or uncle, and I have 7. My mom has 7 siblings, and but I'm like, it's gonna happen at any time, and you kind of realize like, hey, I'm getting older, like they're getting older, and it's about to hit me. But yeah, I think in the health IT world, we've lost some important people. There's some valuable voices, so I'm excited for this episode.
Yeah, it's definitely a somber episode and a reminder that, time is fleeting, right? Like we're only here for a short time, and we've lost 3 bright lights recently, and we're going to talk about the 3 of them today. But yeah, it's in a way it's a nice reminder as well to make sure you stay motivated, right? And you stay driven, and that there isn't unlimited time. Like sometimes we kind of fall into that trap of thinking, oh, I'll just get it done. Like I'll connect with that person a month from now, next year, or whatever. And then, as we found out recently, of course, with these 3, like anything can happen. So yeah, a bit of a somber topic, but I think an important one, right? As we talk about legacy in healthcare.
Yeah, and that's what I love about these 3 people is they each were their own unique personality, right? Like, and they contributed in a big way to the health IT arena. So, I was really excited to talk about them. And the one that really hit me, and this one surprised me, was Paddy Padmanabha. He's the CEO of Damo Consulting, and he started that company. Former consultant, did a lot of consulting with Cleveland Clinic and other big organizations. But I would see Paddy at every single CIO event, the Chime events, HIMSS. He was ever present, and he had his signature bald head that you could see him across the room. You knew exactly who that was, right? And but just enjoy. He was always so gracious and kind, and and willing to share his knowledge and experience and understanding. Was certainly trying to build his business and do that and make an impact on digital health and stuff. But it was always just a pleasure to run into him, and so it was really sad to hear of his passing from cancer. Which seems to be a common denominator these days. But yeah, so I'm excited to feature him, and and really, the nice thing is he's left a legacy. He has a couple of books. His first book was The Big Unlock, so you can go check that out. And that, and then he also co-wrote a book with Ed Marks called Healthcare Digital Transformation, which was such a timely book that came out as we were looking like, how do we embrace digital and how should we approach digital in healthcare? And it was really based on the reality of what Ed and Paddy had done at Cleveland Clinic and how they'd done digital transformation quickly. So just an incredible person that I'm sorry that I won't see again.
Yeah, I didn't know Paddy all that well. I knew him by legacy only. A lot of folks like Ed and Ed Marks and others had spoken very highly of him. I think the one interaction I had with him in person happened at a HIMSS way back when. I think it was even as far back as when we were still going to New Orleans.
Wow.
But I remember, at that time I wasn't really, into social media yet, hadn't really gotten to know a lot of people, but just had gotten introduced somehow, and just seeing how people were reacting to him and talking to him and saying hello to him. I mean, you could tell that he had an impact on people, that he was a connector. He was very much into forging strong relationships. And I just, again, like later on, as I learned who he was, and learned of his stature, if you will, in the industry. It's sort of that stuck in my head, that one little interaction with him where I was introduced. We were just having a quick conversation. He was telling me who he was. I told him what I was doing. But as people were walking by, they were saying, hey, Patty. And it was just nice to see. Clearly, he had a lot of friends in the industry and well respected. So I think that's obviously part of his legacy that I'll remember, now that he's gone.
Definitely. And he had a podcast too. You can go check out, I'm sure those old podcast episodes will be fascinating to listen to now and with this context. But he had a lot of guests on, and a lot of great content that he created. We had him on the Healthcare IT Today podcast as well. I shared that on social media, as kind of a tribute to him and the knowledge that he shared. It's interesting for me to think about Paddy. I didn't realize he had cancer, and I'd just seen him at one of the conferences, and there was a group around him, and he said, hey, John, how's it going? We need to catch up. And it's a little, sad that we didn't get a chance to catch up, and I didn't know more of what was happening. But, it's one of those reminders as we kind of started, is like, take advantage of the opportunities to catch up when you can, because you never know, life is fleeting.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's what you just mentioned there, John, is a poignant reminder of that, right? Like we always assume there's a tomorrow, right? That we can make up for it, right? And
Yep.
and yeah, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, life does get in the way, and we are busy, right? And things do happen. But you look back and go, oh, that was just that small missed opportunity, right? Where
Could I have stopped and talked a little longer, or
yeah. And that's I think that's the case with the second person on our list, right? We also recently lost another bright light in healthcare, and that was John Chilmark, founder of Chilmark Research. He passed away after a long journey with cancer as well.
It's actually John Moore.
John Moore, sorry.
We always said John Chilmark because of Chilmark Research. I always did that 1,000 times.
Oh man.
Plus it's John.
And that is probably going to be my memory of him, because I keep messing up his last name because Chilmark was such a synonymous with John, right? And so, in fact, I think when I first met him at a HIMSS, I said, "Hello, John Chilmark," and he corrected me, of course, in his nice demeaning way, and we had a laugh about that. But yeah, I go figure, I did it here as well.
Are you going to do it for his son too? Right. So his son's taking over the business, John Moore the third. And so, you should do that. It's just a tradition.
I think it's just tradition now. I'll have to just mess that up for him. But honestly, yeah, I mean, John Moore, what a gentleman. The few times again I met him at some of the conferences, first of all, I'd always been impressed with the work and the output of the reports and things that he wrote. It's so insightful, so careful as well in terms of making sure that he presented as many facets of the challenge, the situation, or the company that he was writing about as possible. So really respected his work. And when you spoke to him in person, you could just tell he lived and breathed healthcare.
Yeah. Well, and that was an evolution. He was originally an analyst in another industry, and then decided to focus on healthcare. And ironically, I was my very first HIMSS, where I kind of learned, there's this whole other world I don't know about. I was invited to be on a Meet the Bloggers panel, and John was on that panel, and we were on this Meet the Bloggers panel together, which was really fascinating because he was blogging as an analyst, right? Which was very different than what I was doing, which was more search engine optimization. And that was the start of a good friendship, right? And I always enjoyed learning from him. I don't know if I'd use the word gentleman for him, because he was so brilliant and often abrasive in his opinions, because he didn't put up with BS, right? Like,
it's true.
Like if you were talking BS, he'd call you out on it, right? Like he's like, no, that's not true. This, and this. And he was so brilliant that he was right. Like when he would bring the other idea. And I remember so many times, hanging out at the evening events at different conferences, where he would share some nugget of insight that would like stick with me about what was happening in the world of EHR or the stimulus money at the time, HIEs, are they going to do anything? Are they real? Like all these topics that he covered in his in the Chilmark Research reports. He had this great understanding, had a vibrant personality that was always fun and energetic, that to hang around him, because like you said, he had this energy about the work he was doing that felt different than others. And I just think about how many organizations, companies, investors, acquirers, etc., that read his reports and used his reports to define the industry. So, he really contributed in a massive way. And if you go back and read his write-ups from conferences, they were always spot on the trends, the topics and trends that were happening. Some of my favorites were actually from Epic UGM. Epic didn't get much coverage, and he was pretty honest, if you will, like about what was happening, and he was transparent about things. So I was sad that we actually tried to have him at a HIMSS meetup to kind of bookend it, which would have been awesome, right? I was on a panel at the first one, and sadly his health didn't allow him to go. He chose to prioritize his health, which was a good thing in his time with family, etc. So yeah, he's definitely a loss to the health IT community.
Yeah, and his legacy, obviously, he leaves, his son, equally competent, maybe a little bit less abrasive, right? He's a great guy,
Yeah.
and of course, Chilmark Research itself, right, it's continuing. So what he created and started is continuing, and I think that's a great testament in terms of instilling, in his son the same love and passion for healthcare that he had, and you can see it when you meet John the Third. And I look forward to, I mean, the reporting and the research is still spot on, and it's still a great read. If you haven't, I definitely encourage you to check it out. So, in terms of legacy, I mean, he leaves one that's just continuing, right? And continuing to the great work that he started.
Yeah, and his son will continue it. He's obviously worked there for a lot of years. He knows it inside and out. You're right. He doesn't have the same analyst chops, but he also brings a fresh perspective, which I think is going to be interesting. I bumped into him a number of times at HIMSS, and he just said that there had been this outpouring of love and affection for his father that he appreciated and that his dad appreciated. So it was nice to see that he was able to hear those messages and bring them back to his dad and tell him, how much of a legacy he left.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and let's get to the third name, right? One that's obviously near and dear to my heart as well. And we lost in April Casey Quinlan, right? For many of those on Twitter and other social platforms, she was known as Mighty Casey. And if you ever saw a picture of Casey or met her, you'd never forget her. She was the lady that she was the lady that had tattooed the QR code on her chest, right? And that QR code led to her medical record, right? And that was for in case that she ever, was in an ambulance and was not responsive, that the person would be, the EMT would be able to scan that QR code and get her history and get all the information, and more specifically, her DNR and other advanced directives. So that was the kind of person she was. She lived out loud. She didn't take crap from anybody. She would call it out when she saw it, and didn't care what other people thought of her, about her. And that was her brilliance, right? She was so self-aware that it didn't matter, right? She fought the good fight in her mind, and she often did. Tireless patient advocate. And I think one of my favorite memories of her was, and I wrote about this in an article on Healthcare IT Today. In 2015, I went to the Cinderblocks event that's hosted by Regina Holiday, and it's in this little small town where Regina lives. And Casey and I just found, us. We were both of us sitting at a table in the cafe at the conference, and we're just sharing some talk. And at that time I didn't really know a lot about Casey's history. And so she was able to share a lot of, about herself, her growing up, and all the different jobs she had. And basically what I learned in that interaction was she's a Renaissance woman, right? Like, she's done everything. She's been in the military. She was a journalist. She was a comedian. She'd done so much.
All the
Um,
things.
it's just amazing. And despite, having some challenges at the time, she still was fighting the good fight on behalf of patients, right? She was helping others before helping herself. And that's will stick with me forever about Casey, is just how hard she fought for patients in general, and to improve the healthcare system. And that, to me, that's going to be her legacy.
Yeah, when I first saw the picture of the QR code tattooed on her, I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a meme, right? Like I was like, someone really did this. Like I had to like turn my head and like, wait a minute, like you had to go fact check. Then you realize, wait, no, it's real. Like Casey is that out there and wanted to make a point, right? She wanted to leave that legacy. And when you see that picture and you realize how much she cared about the idea that patients should control their records and you should have access to it, like she was fierce. And that shows you how fierce. She didn't care even, doing her body. So I think there's a legacy just in that image, right? Like, which we'll have to put that in the show notes so people can see what it looks like. But it was amazing. And actually, one of my funniest interactions with Casey, we were talking, and I think I was, acknowledging her, like, oh, it's so impressive that you did that, so brave of you to do that. I said something like that. I was acknowledging what she'd done. She said, John, one of the crazy things is I've gotten old and it's stretched. It doesn't work anymore. Which, I don't know tattoos that well, but I've heard some, I guess, as you get older, as different sizes, as the tattoo gets older, it doesn't quite work. So it was just funny. That's like, okay, that was a little funny side story. But, like all of that aside, that was Casey, right? She's like, yeah, it is what it is. And I've made my point, and and I shared it. And so it was just really, really cute of her. She's like, yeah, John, it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, I think that'll be like Casey's legacy. She really showed and blazed the trail for, along with others, but to show to people that it's okay to advocate for yourself. It's okay to advocate for patients, and it's okay to not be popular, right? And to call it out as she saw it. She called out inequity. She called out when patients weren't getting the service that she believed that they should be getting, and
they weren't being heard, right?
Yeah, and her own, right? I mean, her own situation was horrible, but and she called it out, and again, even though it might not have helped that individual in that moment, I know she was trying to do that. The fact that she did that, I think, showed to everyone, oh, like I can do that too. I can stand up for myself. I can be part of my own care team, and if I'm not, then I can force my way in, and it's okay, right? Because it's me. It's about me at the end of it. So that's something I'll always appreciate from Casey. Just her courage is what I will take most from her time here.
See, and to be fair, I didn't know Casey all that well. I knew her better on Twitter and social media than I did in person. We didn't spend a lot of time together, a few conversations here or there in passing, like I mentioned. But ironically, the reason I didn't talk to her more is every time I would see her, she'd have a crowd around her. It was almost like this entourage of people that just wanted to be around Casey. And so, like that's what I'll remember is like she had this magneticism, that people were just attracted to be with her and her energy, I think, and her passion. And so they just wanted to be there. And so you almost couldn't get in, right? Because there were so many people around her. And that's how I felt many times when I saw her. I was like, wow, she's so popular and people wanted to be around her, which made sense when you saw her, a kind of cult of personality, if you will, that was so strong and passionate.
Hey, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Healthcare IT Today with John Lynn and Colin Hung. Today, we're talking about health IT legacies. This topic was inspired by some bright lights in healthcare that we lost recently, including Paddy Padmanabha, John Moore, and Casey Quinlan. So, John, let's ask this question, since we're talking about legacy. What should the legacy of CIOs, CMIOs, CTOs, or anyone in those kinds of roles, what should they be?
Yeah, it's interesting because if you look at those roles, there's very little individual work. You know what I mean? Like if you're a CIO or a CMIO, you're usually on a committee with a group of people that selects the EMR, that implements it, that creates policies around whatever it might be, security of a patient's record, right? Like all of these minutia, right? In a lot of ways, right? All of these details that matter, and everyone impacts patients, but it's often done as a team, right? And so I think that's what makes some of this stuff hard, right? Is knowing like what was the contribution of that person when almost everything that we do in healthcare IT is done as a team. And so I think that's one of the interesting challenges. So, maybe the way to look at it is you say, what do the team members say about that person? Right? Because they've been on all those committees and they've been in those long meetings and they've been on those, I guess now there's Zoom calls and whatever, right? And so, maybe that's where we look to the legacy is the number, what their team says about them and what it was like to work with them on these often very complex, challenging, politically challenging, financially challenging, et cetera, problems that we deal with in health IT every day.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough. Certainly there are some high profile, folks in these roles, CIOs, CTOs that, have written books and become stars in their own right. But it's rare, right? That just in terms of the numbers, there's far more that toil in the background, that don't write books and just do a good job. And I agree with you. I think the legacy that these folks should strive for is the fact that when they exit their role, that the transition is seamless. They did their job so well that the next person could just pick it up and keep them moving the ball down the hill, right? Or moving it forward. And I think that coupled with just inspiring the team around them, like hiring good people and inspiring the people that work for them to want to stay in healthcare. I think that would be the best legacy if I was a CMO or a CIO at an organization, and a healthcare organization, would be, we did enough to keep these good, talented people wanting to stay in healthcare because they were enjoying the work, because they saw that their work had meaning and that they were being valued. I think, to me, if you did that, then you've got the legacy. Like you've got the legacy that you should be shooting for.
It's interesting to think about because there's two ways I'm thinking about this from a CIO perspective. One is kind of like the football, right?
Mhm.
Like they call the coaching trees. Like, what's your coaching tree? If you were a head coach of the NFL franchise, and how many of your assistants became head coaches, and how many of your past people are now doing, and they say, oh, they came from the Andy Reid coaching tree or the Bill Belichick coaching tree, right? I think we see some of that in health IT with CIOs, right? Where, oh, that person was part of the Ed Marks, coaching, CIO tree,
Right.
because they, and I know he finds a lot of joy and satisfaction in pushing that forward and having his people grow into the people they want. But it's interesting, I think another perspective is, you know, is that everyone's aspiration to become CIO, right? So, I could hear another CIO that maybe isn't as ambitious or doesn't have those same goals, right? In that sense that they might be like, hey, yeah, I want to help them if they want to become CIO, if that's their goal. But there's a lot of people who don't want to be CIO. They'd rather be the CTO or the CMIO to make a bigger impact. And if that's the case, did I keep my team together, my team of 20 people for 20 years, right? Like, I think that would be an interesting legacy as well. The fact that you created such a beautiful environment that people didn't want to leave. Now that's really hard when you think about it, because uh, it's not just the CIO that controls whether you keep it here. A lot of people get burnt out of healthcare because healthcare is challenging. not so much necessarily that they're tired of the leader or whatever, right? So I think that's why it's even more inspirational when you see a team that is together for a long time in healthcare. I think that's an interesting legacy as well, is like, who did I inspire to become a leader, but also who did I inspire to stay and go, stay in the boat and row with me. So that's two other ways that are interesting to look at it.
I foresee us now trying to do the forensic analysis, John, to build these CIO trees and track back and
We need
see.
the ancestry of
Exactly.
CIOs.
Exactly. We'll have to charge for that. But no, I mean, it actually would be interesting. And I know you're right. I mean, not everyone seeks that as their legacy, but it's certainly a nice outcome. And I think it would be very interesting to see what those trees look like with some of these CIOs at the top.
Yeah, it's more incestuous than we realize, right? I mean, we see that in the healthcare marketing side of things, right? In our community there's a lot of switching that happens. And so that the same is true with Epic consultants, with Cerner, with Meditech, etc.
So John, let's get to the last question. What would you want your legacy to be?
It's interesting because not a huge legacy guy. Like, I kind of don't care, like, to some degree, right? Like, I I don't want my name on a building. I don't, like that stuff doesn't make sense to me. You know what I mean? Like, that kind of legacy, like, that's not the legacy I would want to leave, because that doesn't matter so much to me. To me, and I don't think it's any grand thing. To me, it's the individual things. Someone was recently telling me a popular story about the starfish on a beach. I don't know if you ever heard of it, that there's all these thousands of starfish on a beach and someone's throwing it in the ocean. Someone comes up and is like, you're not going to make any dent on this. There's thousands of these, right? And the person says, you're right. And then takes one and throws it in. And I said, but I made a difference for that one. And maybe that's how I look at my legacy, is like, I would love for 1,000 people to tell 1,000 little stories versus, a few people saying, oh, look at this big thing that he did, right? This magnanimous gesture or whatever. So I don't know. That's how I would look at how I try to build a legacy, if you will.
Yeah, I would agree. Although it'd be nice if there was something named after us, but I don't think that's what drive motivates either one of us to it's not about the name on the building, the name on the placards, and all those things. For me as well, it's about the people we had an impact on, right? And that, whether that was we let them in line to get their coffee first, or whether that was, because we helped them get through a challenging situation in their healthcare marketing or in their health IT world, and through our writing or our podcasting or video, or just, having a conversation with us at one of the events. To me, that's the more important legacy, right? That people walk away going, oh, I really enjoyed my conversation, my connection with me. I think that, to me, that would be enough. That someone at least remembered that we shared something and it was helpful. To me, that's a legacy that I'm going for. In a broader sense, there is one that I would love, is to say that, I left healthcare better than when we started, right?
Nice.
When I started in this industry, to say, look, I had an impact on the broader industry, either by opening an eye or two, or putting an idea in someone's head that then became a product or a feature that
Yeah.
went on to improve something for physicians or patients. I think that would be wonderful. Not that I expect any accolade from it, but just knowing that, hey, like what we did, the way we spoke, the people we met, they made a difference in healthcare, and that would be great.
Yeah. I like, you should, the Hamilton reference, that would be enough.
There you go.
Yeah, it's interesting how we often don't recognize this until someone passes away. And one, it was kind of great that we were able to do that for John Moore before he passed away, right? And he could see some of those messages. I think Casey's the same, right? That I think she saw some of the
Tributes and
impact
things,
that she
yeah.
had. It's interesting for me, I think you've had this maybe just a touch as well, or you're about to, because you don't hear about your impact very much, but I actually, and this is maybe my measure of how the legacy I want to leave, which is my son has come to a few health IT events, and, having him be proud of me and hear the stories, and then to have them tell the stories to him about what his dad's done. Is this the first time I've cried on a
I think
episode of
it
our
maybe, John. Maybe, yeah.
when they're talking about kids, but anyway, it's just
Yep.
like seeing that, right? That my kids would be proud of the legacy, and the impact that I've had. That, I think, is a great measure for me.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I think both of us are humble enough where we don't expect anything large, but just those little touches and the little stories, I think, would be enough.
Yeah.
Hey, well, that brings us to the end of another episode. So thank you to all of you who tuned into this episode of Healthcare IT Today. To find out more details about our show, check out the programs page on healthcarenowradio.com. And please share your voice and engage with the community at healthcareittoday.com and on social media using the hashtag HITSM. I'm Colin Ahung with my friend and health IT collaborator, John Lin. Thanks for listening and have a great week.